Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ray. I'm a detransition male, and today I want to talk about a cautionary tale for autogynephiles in relationships with women. Came across this interesting thread in the AGP subreddit, and really wanted to read it on my channel just because I think it was so illustrative, and also something applicable to like my own personal life because I'm kind of like can relate to this in a way. So the tale starts off, hey everyone, lifelong AGP here. I'm 29, bi, and recently divorced from the woman I genuinely thought I would be with forever. My cross-dressing started before puberty and has never gone away. In college, I started dating a woman who was extremely liberal like me. Eventually, I came clean to her about my cross dressing and bisexual desires. She was very, very supportive and assured me that it only made us closer because I could relate more to her girly interest in clothes, makeup, etc. Her support continued for years. We had a threesome with another guy. I'd occasionally meet men for casual encounters. She surprised me with dresses, bought me makeup perfect for my skin tone, and taught me literally everything I know about clothes, hair, nails, and makeup. I never felt so unconditionally loved and accepted by anyone. I just see you. It doesn't matter what you're wearing, she say. Unfortunately, the reality wasn't that simple. After settling into married life, I began indulging my AGP more and more. I became more bold with my outfits in public, mixing in women's clothes like leather pants, painting my nails mauve, growing my hair out. I cross-dressed almost every day when working from home, hung my dresses in the closet without shame, and never wore male underwear. Eventually, I even went out fully presenting femme in another city and loved it. What I didn't notice was the subtle changes in her mannerisms, things like not cuddling as close when we watch TV, using terms like dude or handsome even more while I was presenting femme than when I was masked, less sex, but that's every marriage, right? Then came the breaking point. She cried and admitted that she was no longer attracted to me after seeing me dress and act so feminine for years and more so every day. She no longer felt feminine or desired in our relationship. It, quote, gave her the ick. She wanted a masculine man who made her feel those things. Ain't that relatable? This was emotionally devastating for me. The one person who finally made me feel accepted and actively participated in my feminization told me that it was actually a huge turnoff. I don't even blame her for not being attracted to my femme side. Nobody chooses their attraction, and she told me she didn't want me to repress for her, so she left. After the divorce, I doubled down on my masculine side, started lifting and gained muscle mass and confidence. I cut my hair short, stopped dressing with a few exceptions, and slept with as many women as possible. One of those women became my current girlfriend. I love her very much, and I want to have kids and live a normative life with her. I wish I could express my femme side, but the risk of losing it all just to indulge a dopamine drenched fantasy is too great. But then, can I truly repress my desires for the rest of my life? I don't have the answers, but if you're in a hetero relationship and she knows, I want to encourage you to leave space for your partner's femininity. Make sure you still do the things that make her feel feminine. I like to read the Crossdresser Wives subreddit to see how it feels from their perspective. Many of them feel invisible because their partners are more interested in their inner girl than their wife, so just be aware of that. Too long didn't read. Married a woman who was extremely supportive of my cross-dressing. This led me to overindulging my AGP to the point that she lost all attraction towards me. Now I don't know whether I should repress it forever or risk making the same mistake again. Okay, so there's a lot to cover there. And I think it's very interesting. For starters, the fact that she was supportive from the very beginning initially, like she was aware. So this isn't a case of a cross-dresser or an AGP who, hid things for 10 years and then came out to his wife. Like this is a case of someone who, you know, admitted it from the very beginning, which is, in all these discussions of self-aware AGP, that is always the advice given, is to be honest from the beginning so the woman knows what she's getting into. Now, there's a difference between getting in with someone who's like an occasional crossdresser versus being with someone who, towards the end of his relationship with his wife, like it sounded like he was like almost barreling down towards a full-blown social transition, like cross-dressing every day, wearing women's clothing out in public every day, going full femme. really leaning into that indulgence in the AGP more or less full time. Now, that is different than just occasionally cross-dressing. So I could see why, from the wife's perspective, why that would be a different thing. And so maybe when she first got into that relationship, she didn't really understand where it was going, or like couldn't anticipate how she would react to someone doing it on a more full-time basis or a more indulgent basis. So I think that is the tricky thing with autogynephiles getting into a relationship. In my own personal life, I just started dating a woman a couple months ago. Um, and she's aware of my cross-dressing. And I've cross-dressed like a little bit around her, but not too much. And although she swears up and down that she's bisexual, that she doesn't think that me cross-dressing would be a turnoff for her, that she likes it for kind of the same reasons that the wife expressed in the post, which is that she likes the fact that as a guy, I'm into feminine things, self-care, and can relate to, her love of femininity and, makeup and clothing and all the sort of girly things. Like I can relate to that. Whereas like most guys have like zero interest in that whatsoever, unless they're like gay. So she likes that about me. But what I'm skeptical of is that, is that like her, express desire to, be comfortable with me cross-dressing will translate to any sort of like full-blown indulgence. Like that's sort of like an untested territory for me. And I'm not sure, because what I don't want to have is like the ick develop. And it's hard to predict what will trigger an ick. And once the ick is there, it's hard to get rid of the ick. You know what I'm saying? So, um, I think this is just one of those classic challenges of autogynephiles, and this is why I think autogynephilia is more or less inherently pathological, just because it makes relationships so difficult. It makes it more difficult to find a partner who's compatible, and almost always you have to sacrifice something or another in order to make the relationship work. You have to sacrifice your desire to chase the dopamine, to indulge the fantasy more and more. And you have to sort of, hold yourself back and like lean into the more masculine side, because you want to do what's good for the relationship, because you want to make you're happy, because she's maximally attracted to like the masculine man. And I don't know. And I feel like, so many autogynephiles, they just don't feel like they can repress forever. But once they start indulging, it just quickly snowballs to the point where they're doing it all the time. And then once you're doing it all the time, the even greater risk is going down the full-blown transition pathway to self-identify as trans, to medicalize, etc. And in my mind, that OP who wrote that post, he seemed like, if that divorce hadn't happened and he hadn't had that wake up call, I could easily imagine him going down the transition pathway. Just because once you start indulging that on a day-to-day basis, like you really start asking yourself questions like, how can I do this all the time? And the best way in our current society to do that all the time is to adopt a trans identity. So yeah, I just wanted to read this post as a cautionary tale, because I think with autogynephilia, we imagine that we can have our cake and eat it too, that we can, have all the relationships success with women that we want. Assuming you're interested in relationships with women, there are some autogynephiles where, their attraction to men really dominates and they're more meta attracted, and, they're less interested in relationships with women precisely because it's easier to be feminine around men, because there's not this competition where, your indulgence in femininity takes away from the woman feeling feminine, because the woman feels feminine relative to the more masculine man. But if the man is always constantly engaging in femininity too, then the woman is not going to feel as feminine in comparison, or there's going to be this competition. Because there's this great book called The Way of the Superior Man about sexual dynamics and relationships between males and females, or between any relationship dyad, where essentially the best sexual energy in a relationship, not just sexually, but broader in the context of the whole relationship, is where you have a polarity between masculine and feminine. You don't want two feminine submissive bottoms in the same relationship, nor do you want two masculine dominant toppy type people who have two strong masculine energies in the same relationship. The ideal relationship that works best is where there's a polarity. And I think the problem with AGP is that when you're dating a feminine woman, you risk losing the polarity by fully going down the feminine pathway, and you really need to work to maintain that polarity. The problem is for AGPs, often that polarity can feel incongruent to some degree or another, because it conflicts with your sincere desire to feminize. You have this strong dopamine driven desire to chase that feminization, chase that euphoria, chase that dopamine. And that sort of conflicts with the desire to remain masculine. And often this comes in stages, or it kind of swings back and forth, because as we saw in that post, when his wife divorced him, he swung the pendulum back, and he really got very masculine. He cut his hair, started working out in the gym, and getting masculine and gaining that masculine confidence. But eventually those desires for feminization usually return. So the question is how to indulge them. And full-blown repression is often dangerous because it ends up backfiring, but full-blown indulgence often backfires too. And so the question is how to integrate, and how much to integrate. Because you don't want to integrate too much to trigger the ick. And also, it's not just triggering the ick in like your partner. You can also trigger the ick in like just your regular social interaction by triggering that uncanny valley of male femininity, such that despite how good it feels to express your individuality and to be feminine, like there really is like a negative social judgment of feminine males. And so you choose that risk at your own peril, essentially, in terms of triggering that uncanny valley ick in other people. So the question is how to maintain your life as a masculine guy, and not feel crippled by this repression. Because once you go down the full repression pathway, often the problem is you start developing obsessive thoughts, where like you just obsessively start thinking and imagining and fantasizing about how good it would feel to indulge in something or another. And so that's when you can start getting into these risky behaviors, and you can start and so that's no good either. And like also living in secrecy, living in privacy, living in shame, that's not good. So this is why I think like autogynephilia is really one of the situations where like every solution is like a compromise. Like there's no perfect solution here. And I mean, and I always on my channel caution against going down the transition pathway, just because there's so many problems with that, both ethically and socially and psychologically. And you're just setting yourself up for like a difficult time. Now, I know there's going to be autogynephiles or people who have gone down the transition pathway, and they will swear up and down that it was the right choice for them, and that they would do it all over again, and that they're much happier than ever before. And I don't want to discount that. I think to some extent, I can believe those stories, that they're being honest and their assessment. But I think it's very easy to succumb to the sunk cost fallacy. It's very easy to sort of justify our own decisions, using confirmation bias, because otherwise, when we sort of start questioning that, it can raise cognitive dissonance. And when there's cognitive dissonance over that internal conflict, you start to go down the pathway that just reduces the dissonance. And one of the ways to reduce the dissonance is to just like rationalize and justify that you actually made the best decision. And that's part of like the sunk cost fallacy. It plays into that machinery of self-rationalization. So I don't necessarily want to say like, oh, if you say you're happy going that transition pathway, you're just lying or deluding yourself. But at the same time, I just want to be cautious that, when we're dealing with psychology, you can't just take people's verbal statements at face value. Anytime you're dealing with psychology, you have to sort of allow the fact that what people say does not always match up to the inner truth, because psychology and like has all these egotistical defense mechanisms. These defense mechanisms protect us from the harsh truths of reality. And so anyway, I'm getting way out track here. um, all this to say is that this is a cautionary tale for autogynephiles. If your partner, your girlfriend says they really accept your cross-dressing, just don't take that as an excuse to full out indulge. Like, because there's you want to be careful here. You want to maintain that masculine polarity. And yeah, I think, just be cautious about this, and like and how you choose to indulge. And the sad thing is, I think this like cautionary tale reveals why so many autogynephiles are single, like why they will never really find relationship success, and why often the end point of autogynephilia is just being alone and making yourself happy, because this is, at the end of the day, autogynephilia is very a self-reflective orientation. It's a self-reflective paraphilia. It's reflexive. And so it makes sense that people would go down the pathway to make themselves happy without really considering the implications of like how it impacts their relationships with other people, which is why you have these autogynephiles, these fathers and husbands, blowing up their marriages, blowing up their families, or risking doing that to pursue the path of euphoria, to pursue their own sexual desires, essentially pursuing these fantasies, because psychologically it's too difficult to repress. So this is why I think autogynephilia is inherently pathological, just because it really makes it hard to find happiness and success in normal relationships. It just, I mean, which is not to say it's impossible to find happiness and success in love and relationships and dating and sex. And like as an autogynephile, I just think it makes it so much harder. It makes it so much harder. So, all right. Well, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. Take care and bye-bye.